Today, I want to take a closer look at AI or machine learning from the perspective of an artist. And after taking a look at what this technology is and how it works and how it changes the creative community right now, I'm going to tell you how AI stole my art and how I think about the entire topic as an illustrator. And while I'm talking, you'll see me sketching a woodpecker in ink and watercolor just to make the whole topic a bit less stressful and more relaxing. So lately there's been a lot of talk about AI generated art and texts on the internet, and it has caused quite a lot of discussion in the creative community. And artificial intelligence generators are using artworks and texts and all kind of intellectual property to generate new versions of it without the consent of the human creators. And it is already changing our culture and raises a lot of questions about the value of creating any kind of art. So, what is AI? In case you don't know yet, and if you do, then please feel free to skip ahead to the other parts of this. AI stands for artificial intelligence, which is a term that's a bit misleading since right now in 2023, there's no actual intelligence as we understand it behind the processes and algorithms of these tools described as AI. So the AI language models and image generators have no real understanding of the data they're processing. They don't make decisions, they aren't aware of themselves, and they do not have an understanding of the world. So don't assign them human qualities just yet. They're just clever algorithmic programming, and they put together their answers or images from the data they were fed before. And the companies call that training. A less misleading term instead of artificial intelligence would be to say machine learning, although, again, the machines in questions are not doing any independent learning similar to humans or other life forms. And for all those limitations, they're shockingly effective in a few areas. I'll give them that. There are texts and images floating around the web that you only recognize as AI generated at second glance. So let's take a look at how AI actually works. The language models and image generators need samples before they can generate anything. They can't create text or images from nothing. The companies call this training. The AI is being provided with huge data sets that are being run through several algorithms. And where does that data come from? From us, human creations, books, media, the internet, especially the internet. In the case of image generators, the entire internet is scraped so that as many images as possible can be put into data sets for the AI to learn from. It's very probable that what you can read here will soon be scraped for ChatGPT, which is a text generator and basically a very refined chatbot, if you want. And scraped to integrate it into its training data set. And I've already found my art in the data sets of image generators like Stable Diffusion. I'll talk about that more in a bit. But basically, if you can see it on the internet, it will be taken. Without our data or content, as corporations like to call it, none of these tools would exist. AI, as it currently works, has some limitations. So, artificial intelligence generated art can often look a bit creepy since the computer doesn't have an actual understanding of human anatomy, for example. It just puts together new images based on thousands of images that were put into a data set previously. So, sometimes AI generated images have weird or creepy looking humans with 7 fingers or with deformed heads or with really weird eyes. So while it can more or less reliably spit out something that you entered in a prompt, like maybe something like a red panda dancing in the pale moonlight in the style of Albrecht Dürer. So if you want this, it will attempt to generate it. And many of the generated images look okay. Some look a bit weird or creepy, as I said, but many of those sort of work. But every art style of the past or present is within its reach, provided it has been fed with enough scraped data about it. And if it's on the internet, it's very likely that you can find it in a data set and used by AI image generators. So AI art is already beginning to flood things like stock image services, and especially for fields like editorial illustration that are often based on very abstract concepts or imagery, it's being used already by magazines or web publications. And this is not to say that this is seen as negative, because big tech loves AI. They absolutely love what they want to do with it and what they can see it doing for the rest of us. And I will talk about this in a minute again. So, yeah, we are only in the beginning stages of this technology, so it's very likely that the results will become more refined over time. Let's look at texts. Texts written by language models like ChatGPT often produce outcomes that seem weirdly hollow, but they can imitate all kinds of styles. So you can ask ChatGPT to write poems or product reviews or summaries of novels or songs, talks, code, fairy tales, or scientific papers. There's nothing ChatGPT won't generate for you, and it always presents the results sounding very confident and very matter of fact, even if the facts don't hold up and are entirely fabricated. And I've read a lot about this recently. There have been many examples of people just trying to generate something with ChatGPT, and the results have frankly been a little bit concerning because in the case of scientific papers, you can ask ChatGPT to write a scientific paper on you, and the result will be that it just makes up its own non-existing citations to make this text sound like a scientific paper. In the case of code, it produces code that won't work. If you ask it to summarize a novel, it will do so without even having access to the novel's actual text. And if it's not a well-known novel or something, or a novel that has been written about a lot, then it will simply claim random things about it just to make the text longer or seem more legit. And you can also ask it to write your biography, and it will do so and simply make up stuff. So this technology has no built-in fact checker or bullshit detector, and it doesn't announce that it just makes up things out of thin air, or rather out of the data that it has been fed and that it uses to put together in convincing sounding sentences. Let's take a look at how artificial intelligence is changing the creative industry right now. So, for all of its current limitations, AI and computer generated images or texts could make a huge part of today's creative industry obsolete in the near future. If you use artificial image generation tools like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney to put together illustrations, think about maybe editorial illustrations or children's books or book covers. And if you let language models like ChatGPT write your texts, think about essays or articles or even novels, then you don't need artists or writers anymore, or do you? This is not just a dystopian fantasy that I'm making up. It's happening all over the web and in the real world right now, just a few months after these tools have been let out into the world. So let's take a look at a few examples. The publisher Tor Books recently had to admit they had been using an AI image generator for the cover art of one of their books. There's even a children's book that has been created entirely through this new technology. It was written using ChatGPT, and the illustrations were generated with Midjourney, which is an AI image generator. You just need to take a look at it to see that right now it cannot really replace human writers and illustrators, but give the technology a few years and this might look very different. By the way, I will leave links for all of this so that you can take a look yourself. What about texts? The internet is also already being flooded with texts generated through ChatGPT with no one really fact-checking them. And I've heard, for example, from a freelance writer who has been contacted by one of their clients. So they said that the writer's services wouldn't be needed anymore for writing entire texts, but the client offered them to edit text generated by the ChatGPT to make it sound a bit more human, but of course for a much lower fee. The news service BuzzFeed recently announced they will use AI for content creation from now on, and their stock immediately went up 200%. And they will also cut their workforce by 12%. Just to give you an idea of how these technologies can really disrupt our cultural sphere. And the rest of society too. There are schools which have already banned ChatGPT because students, of course, will use the technology to write their essays with no consideration for, let's say, historical facts. The text generator also likes to sort of balance out more controversial topics in the sense of a false balance. For example, it will give arguments, if you ask it, why colonial racism or the Holocaust might not have been entirely negative things to happen to humanity. And I hope you can see why this is a very, very scary development. If you want to read a reaction that comes from a more poetic and existential perspective, right from the heart of an artist, then check out what the musician and songwriter and singer Nick Cave has commented on what he thinks about ChatGPT writing song lyrics in the style of Nick Cave. And if you're not familiar with him or any of his work, then definitely give it a listen. He's a really great artist and musician. And what many people fear, and I have to say I'm one of them, is that very soon the internet might become unusable through tools like this. So even now the internet is already being flooded with bullshit texts that sound like they've been through a translation engine a few dozen times. And maybe you've already noticed recently that searching for high quality information on the internet has become almost impossible, or at least very, very challenging, because the search results are often filled with scammy sites that are just generated and optimized for search engine results, mainly to squeeze a bit of ad money out of them. And of course, search engines are machines as well, so there are things you can do to make your page rank higher, and these sites definitely use the mechanisms of this. And when I search for things like what's the difference between Mac and Windows computers, or what are foods with a lot of iron, or even how to care for your hamster, then I either get a spammy bot-generated site with nonsense text, or a video that has been created by someone who reads those spammy texts out loud. And I think this will only get worse with tools like ChatGPT. But hey, at least we're getting AI-generated art next to those texts to brighten them up. And as always, with these apocalyptic scenarios, it's already happening. There are questions on Quora, which is a platform for getting answers to questions posted by its users, that are flooded with copy and paste answers by ChatGPT. And in this case, it was not as bad because the questions were also generated by ChatGPT. You can often distinguish AI writing from human writing through its tendency to provide very long, non-committal answers, and this similar to this kind of false balance that I talked about earlier. A bit like writing when it's optimized for search engines, which makes sense if the language model sources a lot of its text from the internet. And when you program these generators, of course you need to make sure that your precious AI language model itself isn't trained on those stylistically questionable robot-written texts, but only on human text. So there will likely be a watermark to make sure of that, and I'm sure there will be similar watermarks in AI-generated images. And this will also be the business model behind ChatGPT. They already announced this. Imagine how you can sell this stuff to schools or newspaper, because they really depend on detecting what is an AI written text and what is a human written text. And by the way, Microsoft has already planned to make AI text creation a part of Microsoft Word. So who is behind these AI tools anyway? It's billionaire investors who are funding Silicon Valley startup companies with venture capital, who then build these tools. The same kind of people who have brought us social media and corporate platforms in all shapes and sizes that destroy existing communities and the way our society and the public work. The people behind this proudly call this disrupting and breaking things. So let's take a look at our AI friends. The Leon 5B dataset that provides the data for the image generator Stable Diffusion is put together by a group funded by venture capital. And their website, Leon AI, says, "We believe that machine learning research and its applications have the potential to have huge positive impacts on our world and therefore should be democratized." And I believe democratizing in this case simply means stealing data from people. Let's talk about my personal experience and how I found out that an AI had stolen my art. Just out of curiosity, I wanted to check if my art had been scraped anywhere from the web and used by Stable Diffusion. And they let you do this. They graciously allow you to do that on the website haveibeentrained.com. And the group behind this site is spawning.ai, and they state in their Q&A that, I quote, "Copyright is an outdated system that is a bad fit for the AI era." And they also state that, quote, "We believe that the artist community will benefit from this AI training to be consensual." And let me explain briefly why I shudder when I read this. As an artist, the intellectual property right is the most important right that I have. If I can't manage the rights to my art and decide who's allowed to do what with it, then it becomes entirely worthless. If everyone can just take it and plaster my art everywhere, how am I going to get paid? So with this happening, you can forget about income streams like licensing or selling your usage rights to publishers or to magazines. And these are some of the main ways that artists get paid these days. So anyway, I didn't expect to find anything because my art isn't like the digital AI art style that you see from a lot of these image generators. I go field sketching, I create scientific illustrations, and I'm not a very well-known artist either. But I was curious and probably a bit naive because, as it turns out, and the search result really surprised me, the site found countless examples of my art scraped directly from my website and from other places on the web. And what I found most unsettling is that the algorithm grouped many of my pictures directly together. I'm not sure if it really does that based on my style or on alt tags or URL properties, but it was a really, really creepy moment. So the site claims to let you opt out of this kind of image scraping, that you can remove your art from these training datasets. And to opt out of your images being used, you have to create an account and mark every single image by clicking right. And as of right now, you can't even exclude your own domain or mark several images at once. If you have lots of pictures of your art on the net, which, artists tend to have, then you will be busy for a very long time. And here's the catch. The opt-out only works for future versions of the datasets, and these are the base of the machine learning systems like Stable Diffusion. The Leon 5B dataset, for example, is announced on their website as a new era of open large-scale multimodal datasets. And in their FAQ, they mention that these datasets are simply indexes to the internet, so lists of the URL address and alt text, and no images are stored in the dataset itself. Images that might have been stored at any point to train the AI have been deleted again, and they don't address any other copyright issues in their FAQ at all. I didn't volunteer any of my images for web scraping. I certainly didn't allow them to use any of my art, and I suspect none of the artists whose images I saw did this. So the people building these datasets and image generators are literally stealing our intellectual property, and they are telling us it's for our best. So the question is, can we protect our images and the copyright on our images, as we should be able to? And there's a lot happening around this right now, a lot of discussion, and also a group of artists has just filed a lawsuit against Stability AI, Midjourney, and DeviantArt for their use of the image generator Stable Diffusion that uses millions of copyrighted works. Then there's the stock image agency Getty Images. They have also sued Stability AI for copyright violation. Actually, I don't think they're doing this to stop the technology, but rather to get good licensing deals in the future, because they will benefit from these. It will still be interesting how these lawsuits play out. And of course, we also need more direct resistance to this in the meantime. There are a few technical or legal measures that individuals can use to protect their images from being used like this. So you can try to take technical measures like adding a no AI meta tag to your website, or tell web crawlers not to index your site via a small robots text file, but it's uncertain if this will be respected by AI image scrapers. And then there's the opt-out on haveibeentrained.com that I described. And hopefully this should also work, even if it's very cumbersome. The site wired.com has an interesting piece about what else we can do in different areas to take back control over our images and texts, and I will link that below. In any case, the discussion has just started, and I think it will be critical that we as a society find a way to establish rules around these technologies. You know, it's already hard enough for independent artists and writers to protect their intellectual property, but the companies behind these tools are on the way of turning our art into empty replicated shards of bullshit, while they're data farming us and our creativity and selling it to us as a huge positive impact on the world. And it's not a world I want to live in. Thank you for listening to this. We can discuss it some more in the comments. And if you would like to support my work, you can do so through Patreon. This will allow me to create more pieces like this. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching this, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.